beautiful. We're reading in A Course in Miracles in the text, chapter 5, Healing and Wholeness. And we are in section 5, the ego's use of guilt. We'll start in paragraph 1. Perhaps some of our concepts will become clearer and more personally meaningful if the ego's use of guilt is clarified. The ego has a purpose, just as the Holy Spirit has. The ego's purpose is fear, because only the fearful can be egotistic. The ego's logic is as impeccable as that of the Holy Spirit, because your mind has the means at its disposal to side with heaven or earth as it elects. But again, remember that both are in you. In heaven, there is no guilt, because the kingdom is attained through the atonement, which releases you to create. The word create is appropriate here because once what you have made is undone by the Holy Spirit, the blessed residue is restored and therefore continues in creation. What is truly blessed is incapable of giving rise to guilt and must give rise to joy. This makes it invulnerable to the ego because its peace is unassailable. It is invulnerable to disruption because it is whole. Guilt is always disruptive. Anything that engenders fear is divisive because it obeys the law of division. I'll pause here and say that's a really interesting concept, that anything that engenders fear is divisive. And we know that the ego's goal is to separate and keep separate. And spirit's goal, not even goal, but purpose, is to show us the truth of completion. Anything that engenders fear is divisive because it obeys the laws of division. If the ego is the symbol of the separation, it is also the symbol of guilt. Guilt is more than merely not of God. It is the symbol of attack on God. That's interesting. Let's pause here and just let that sink in. Guilt isn't just not of God, it's an attack on God. This is a totally meaningless concept except to the ego, but do not underestimate the power of the ego's belief in it. This is the belief from which all guilt really stems. The ego is the part of the mind that believes in division. How could part of God detach itself without believing it is attacking him? So I'll pause here and say, this is really interesting. So any part of us that believes in division, or that believes that there's enough separation that we can hurt some people without hurting everyone, or that we can destroy that we can cause harm or damage to parts of the sonship without it affecting the entirety of the sonship, or that I can be cruel to my brother and it won't affect me. And that is the lie of the ego, and that spirit is exposing, and that A Course in Miracles is here to help us unlearn. This is a totally meaningless concept except to the ego, but do not underestimate the power of the ego's belief in it. This is the belief from which all guilt really stems. The ego is a part of the mind that believes in division. How could part of God detach itself without believing it is attacking him? We spoke before, so we'll pause here and say, a part of God detach itself. So God is the all in all. We are all connected. We are all in and of God. And so it makes sense to me that the question posed is, how could part of God detach itself, to harm another part without believing it's attacking him? Now we know this attack by ego is meaningless, but as we've learned earlier in the Course, even though we might be having a delusion or a nightmare, the effects of it can still wreak havoc in our lives. For example, if you are running through the woods at night and you're sure there's a wolf behind you, even if there's not, if you're afraid of that wolf and you're so scared that you're not paying attention, you might hit into a tree. Now, that doesn't make the wolf real, but your belief in it being real caused you to act in error or to do something that wasn't beneficial to you and others. We spoke before of the authority problem as based on the concept of usurping God's power. The ego believes that this is what you did because it believes that it is you. I'm going to pause here and say, I think it's so interesting. We've been learning lately about this, that The ego believes it is you. Because we talk about not being ego identified, but it's interesting because it's the ego also that is us identified. If you identify with the ego, you must perceive yourself as guilty. Whenever you respond to your ego, you will experience guilt and you will fear punishment. Ooh, interesting. So if we're experiencing guilt and we're fearing punishment, we already know we're in ego right then and there. We're ego identified in that moment. Of course, the beauty of it is we can choose at any moment to let go of fear. Now, it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like it, but it really is a pattern interrupt. When we're feeling that guilt, we're feeling fear, we're feeling upset, to know that we are in some way in that moment being ego identified. Because when we're identified with our true self, we are at peace. Even if there's an alignment where we know there's aligned action that needs to be taken, or that, where spirit calls us to say or show up in a certain way, there is an underlying peace. Even if we're acting from a place of strength and power, there is an underlying peace. And with ego, there isn't. There's what's underlying anything that is directed by ego is fear or guilt, which are basically the same thing. Whenever you respond to your ego, you will experience guilt and you will fear punishment. The ego is quite literally a fearful thought. However ridiculous the idea of attacking God may be to the sane mind, never forget the ego is not sane. It represents a delusional system and speaks for it. Listening to the ego's voice means that you believe it is possible to attack God, and that a part of him has been torn away by you. Fear of retaliation from without follows because the severity of the guilt is so acute that it must be projected. Whatever you accept into your mind has reality for you. I'll pause here and say, our perception is our personal reality. It doesn't make it objectively true, but it is true for us via perception. It is your acceptance of it that makes it real. If you enthrone the ego in your mind, you're allowing it to enter makes it your reality. This is because the mind is capable of creating reality or making illusions. I'll pause here and say, have you ever been with someone who just refused to look at anyone else's perspective? Just refused, and you're lovingly trying to help them look at it from a different lens, and no, I know this happened because they said this and they shouldn't have said that, and they're bad, and they're bad, and they're bad, and they're just so ego identified in that moment that they can't even take that sacred pause and take a breath and look at it from a wider perspective, and allow to let go of that fear a little bit. And we know from many prior teachings in A Course in Miracles that there's really only two choices between fear and love, between being right or happy. And I know I've been there where I am so committed to being right that I don't care that it's making me and everyone around me miserable. Slowly learning to choose happiness over rightness. So that's the good news. This is because the mind is capable of creating reality or making illusions. I said before that you must learn to think with God. To think with him is to think like him. This engenders joy, not guilt, because it is natural. Guilt is a sure sign that your thinking is unnatural. Unnatural thinking will always be attended with guilt because it is the belief in sin. The ego does not perceive sin as a lack of love, but as a positive act of assault. This is necessary to the ego's survival because as soon as you regard sin as a lack, you will automatically attempt to remedy the situation. I'll pause here and say, if we can look at someone having an error in thinking with compassion, our natural instinct will be to assist. But if we look at it as them being evil, or here it says a positive act of assault, of having ill intent, evil intent, instead of simply being ignorance, you will automatically attempt, let me reread that last sentence. This is necessary to the ego's survival because as soon as you regard sin as a lack, you will automatically attempt to remedy the situation and you will succeed. The ego regards this as doom, but you must learn to regard it as freedom. Man, sometimes I'll speak for myself, sometimes I am so committed to being right that I'm not actually trying to solve anything. And when I catch myself in that state, it's like, I recognize this is crazy. I'm not trying to solve anything, not really solve it, not bring back harmony or unity. I'm just trying to prove to my own ego more than anything that I'm right. You know, the ego basically propping itself up. It's not giving my true self anything of value, but the ego in that moment can have this moment of pride of I'm right, and it's short-lived, and it's damaging to relationships, and ultimately it brings us misery. The guiltless mind cannot suffer. Being sane, the mind heals the body because it has been healed. The sane mind cannot conceive of illness because it cannot conceive of attacking anyone or anything. I said before that illness is a form of magic. It might be better to say that it is a form of magical solution. The ego believes that by punishing itself, it will mitigate the punishment of God. Yet even in this, it is arrogant. It attributes to God a punishing intent and then takes its intent as its own prerogative. It tries to usurp all the functions of God as it perceives them because it recognizes that only total allegiance can be trusted. The ego cannot oppose the laws of God any more than you can, but it can interpret them according to what it wants, just as you can. That is why the question, what do you want, must be answered. You are answering it every minute and every second, and each moment of decision is a judgment. That is anything but ineffectual. Its effects will follow automatically until the decision is changed. Remember, though, that the alternatives themselves are unalterable. The Holy Spirit, like the ego, is a decision. Together they constitute all the alternatives the mind can accept and obey. The Holy Spirit and the ego are the only choices open to you. God created one, so you cannot eradicate it. You made the other, and so you can. Wow, it's really powerful. We can let go of the ego because we created it, not God. We can't really let go of the Holy Spirit because it's eternal, and we didn't create it. We didn't create truth and love. And what a blessing. We can't get rid of it. We can't actually get rid of our salvation. We can't get rid of our joy. It's there eternally. But we can get rid of the lies that hold us back. And that's the good news. And that's what A Course in Miracles is teaching us how to do. Thank you for being here. Thanks for joining me. I hope you got some value out of today's reading. Love you so much. See you soon.